Hey there, friends. This is Bill MacDonald, the writing doctor, and today I'm going to use several different strategies to score an essay. And sometimes people will ask me, what do you do if you want to give a paper a 3 for development and organization, but a 2 for conventions? Well, since every essay is scored by 2 people, then you can give that paper a 2 and a 3 and be the 2 different scores, and that paper would get a 5 in 4th grade. And if it's a 7th, ninth, or 10th grader, then they doubled that score to get a 10. So I'm going to show you a paper that I gave a 2 plus 3 minus 2. And I'm going to show you some strategies that I think will help your students be a little bit more engaged in the revising and editing process. I will be guiding you. I'm going to do an activity called King of the Mode. And the mode is another word for purpose. What's the purpose that we're writing for? And uh, the one we're going to be doing today is expository. So the reason I use the word king is because I'm going to use a deck of cards, and ace is going to be the lowest number that we start with for each idea, all the way up to a king. And so if you think of an ace as 1, all the other numbers from 2 through 9 will be 2 through 9 details or sentences. 10 will be 10, jack would be 11, queen 12, and king 13. If you have more than 13, then you just get to keep going and start over uh, with ace again, and 13 plus a 2, 3, 4, or 5, and that would be your total amount of details or sentences that you have on that idea. So without further ado, let me go ahead and show you inside my binder on page 539. You're going to see a colorful train. And so this colorful train has no words on it, but it does have a couple of things. If you'll notice, it does have, I'll use my annotation here to kind of place some things that I'm pointing out. It does have this Wonder Woman here. And if you're going to use a graphic organizer for students who are allowed accommodations, they're not supposed to be in color like this, and they're not supposed to have any pictures that would help guide your students. And so Wonder Woman for sure would be out. I think that this whistle would need to be removed, and I'm not sure about the engine. Maybe somebody can correct me. I don't see how the engine could hurt, but as you see here, if you think about it, what it's gonna be is the yellow box is gonna represent the introduction. The blue and the green are the body, either reason 1 for blue and reason 2 for green, or reason 1 can be the example, the reason, and blue, and the example, the way you explain and explode it, can be the green, with the red being the conclusion. And so that's how you organize the essay, with those different modes, the different boxes. And so some of you might call that a flow chart if you're used to working with thinking maps. And it's what you put with each box or each circle, whatever you use, that helps with the development. And so if you combine a flow chart, which is these trains, with a tree map, which is going to help with the development, the bottom part over here, let me kind of highlight what you might write in your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. Uh, sometimes people ask me, why do you have that lighter line there in the middle? Well, if you're a teacher who says, do you want this, Mr. MacDonald, to be an outline or a rough draft? And I'll say, yes, use it as an outline or a rough draft. If you're going to use it as an outline, then you just put phrases and words inside underneath here. If you're going to use it as a rough draft and you're going to have 2 reasons, then you write all of reason 1 developed under the blue train and all of reason 2 developed under the green train. If you're only going to have 1 reason and you're saying explain and explode that reason, turn it from green to greener to greenest, then you can ignore that line right here in the middle and you would write your entire rough draft inside here, the body part, and the red caboose would be whatever, however you would end the essay, the conclusion. So if we go ahead and look at page 540, you're going to see the same train, but it's completely in black and white, but the whistle is still there and the engine is still there. So each district kind of has to decide on their own. It's a district decision about graphic organizers, but the state is very specific about what they do and do not allow. So there's a little bit of leeway that some of you have. This could be a box instead of an engine. Other than that, I think there would be nothing wrong with this as a graphic organizer because it doesn't have arrows or anything that would help your students. Now, let me show you, come back out of there for a second. I'm going to show you what I give to teachers when they do a student training. They actually get a graphic organizer that's a little bit more thorough at the beginning. It has the Wonder Woman there, and Wonder Woman starts with 2 W's, and so the first W is what is the purpose? And so that's why that line is red. 911, you better understand that the purpose is expository for this essay. What, the other W, is the prompt, the topic, or if you're just doing simple open-ended questions, what is the question? And I had mentioned in an earlier video that you can find all my prompts for elementary through secondary on pages 416 to page 454 of the binder. The colorful and black and white train graphic organizer is on page 539, page 540. This one has a little bit more guidance. My hero is the one that we're going to be working on. And something else that people will ask me, Mr. MacDonald, how long do you want the introduction to be? And I'll say, well, how many fingers do you have on each hand? 5. So I would suggest, I found these in Progresso the other day, that you would spend at the most 5 lines on your introduction and 5 lines on your conclusion. So 26 minus 10, that leaves you with 16 lines to write the body. That would be 8 lines each for 2 different reasons, or 16 lines to write 1 reason and explain and explode it. And the reason I don't say sentences is because students write from small to medium to large. So we have to understand the idea of spacing in terms of if a student writes larger, he still has to try and finish that introduction within 5 lines or less. So if he only can fit 1 sentence inside there or 2 sentences inside those 5 lines, then so be it. He has to kind of limit himself unless he can start writing a little bit smaller. Now, the essay that we're going to look at chose her dad as her hero. That was the idea. So if you look closely at the train, I crossed off one of his eyes because you can only have one idea about the topic. And the reason I have that whistle on top is a whistle is an attention getter. Did there happen to be an attention getter? Are there transitions between each idea in the I introduction where the idea should be, the B the body, blue and the green, and the C the conclusion? Or did they do what I call whiplashing the reader? And here's the king of the mode. I have the ace of spades as the introduction. And the reason I like using the spade for the introduction for king of the mode is a spade is what you use to hook something. So if there's no hook, then I would just take away that one and we wouldn't count it. So we will check and see if there's a hook, an attention getter. Our body is going to be diamonds and clubs. How many sides does a diamond have? 4. How many little leaves, if you want to call it, does a club have? 3. What's 4 plus 3? 7. And so if you have the 6 plus 1, 6 W's plus 1, who, what, when, where, why, which, and how, you could use the 7 W's in order to fill up a paragraph full of ideas. So the student said that her dad was her hero. This was her organizational structure. Why? The reason. The second bullet said, organize your essay. Give me a reason. He's a hard worker. Can you give me an example of what you mean? Because remember, in order to get a 2, you have to organize. So she said that he makes roads. And another part of the essay, a little bit later on in the essay, she says, when he picks me up at daycare. Now, since those ideas, you look at me in the screen for a second, because working on roads and picking me up at daycare are not directly related, she's going to have to write something that ties those together, the transition that's between them, or else it's not going to make sense to talk about having your dad pick you up at daycare, since that has nothing to do with making roads, if that makes sense. Her strongest conclusion detail was that he makes me want to work harder. So I'm going to read you the essay. You're not going to get to see it, but you are going to get to hear it. So again, I'm going to put on my reading glasses. Don't make fun of me. And so I'll try my best to count the details using this activity that I call King of the Mode. My dad is nice. Okay. That's an opinion. I'll call that a hook. He's funny. Okay. He's nice. So we give 1. He's funny. He's kind and grumpy sometimes. Since grumpy is not a positive trait and the prompt was right about my hero, I would suggest that you leave out anything negative so that it doesn't take away from the focus, the idea of your dad being a hero. Talking about his grumpiness would not be something you would want to include. He is my dad and my hero. I already know he's your dad, but you did say that he's your hero, so I'll go ahead and add 1 more for that. Now, what some people do that I've taught this strategy to is, in every time that the student does something they're not supposed to do, for example, a negative trait, they would put 1 card back. In other words, instead of giving them 4 points for the introduction, they would only give them 3. Or because we heard the repetitious part, my dad, my dad. But we'll go ahead and leave it at 4 for now. And now we're going to move into the body where she explains why that he's a hard worker. My dad, repetition, is a hard worker. That is why my dad is my hero. So that's repetitious. So I'm still going to stay with A, number 1. My dad is my hero, repetition. So I'm still staying with A, number 1, because nothing new has been said yet. because he makes roads for doctors. Okay, making roads. So I'm going to finally move it over. Makes roads for doctors. I'll move that up there so you can kind of see the card itself. Makes roads for doctors. Doctors are very important people. Policemen, that's a detail. Firemen. Um, I can't, I think emergency vehicles, but since I couldn't read it, I'm not going to give credit. Whenever I can't read something, I don't give credit. And citizens of the city, since that it does help, I will add that. And so makes roads for the citizens of the city. Okay. And those are some of the examples. My dad is a hard worker. You already said that. If he were to go make roads, already done, and get heat stroke, he would still go to work. Okay, that's something added, so I'll give credit for that one. In period, the next day. And so because there's a fragment there, what you might do is say, I'm going to take off one because of the fragment, the incomplete thought. In the hot sun, they did it again, so I'm going to move it back. So as you see, your development and organization is being rewarded, but you're being penalized slightly because of conventions. And so what they say when you're giving a score is it's sort of like a balancing act. You kind of have to look at the essay holistically between the organization, the development, and the conventions. And all of that just to let our family eat. That's pretty good. It was a fragment, but I'm going to go ahead and give credit for that one. And so I was able to see 6 details about my dad being a hard worker and helping by the roads that he makes and helps all of these people, including us citizens, get there. Now, here's where she transitions to going to school and picking up. Every day I go to school knowing that my dad is out there working his butt off. And so what I like about that is that she's talking about going to school, transitioning, while talking about a dad who's working, but he's working his butt off. Since that's an idiom, I'm going to give an extra credit for that. So I'm going to allow 2 points for that. And so we're going to be hopefully on number 4 now. Let's see what you have. And every day he picks me up from daycare. So apparently the student goes to daycare after school. Let's see if this works. And my face is just beaming. Okay. Now, if you say that you're happy, that's telling me, if you're ecstatic, that's telling me with higher vocabulary. But if you say my face is beaming, that's showing me how you act. I'm going to give extra credit for that. And what we're seeing is they're connecting the 2 ideas, a dad who's a hard worker. And so when I see him, when he picks me up, it just makes me beam with excitement and joy. Okay, so because of excitement, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there and not give extra credit for that, uh, because I know that he didn't get hurt. That one's pretty good. So she's there sharing her thoughts with, oh, I know he didn't get hurt, he came home, he gets to come home. That's actually another detail that the student added. So he gets to come home. So we can either say there's 5 plus 7 or 6 plus 8. So you see that we're in that range of how many details that the student spent. So now we're on the conclusion. The reason I like to use the heart for the conclusion is I want to make an emotional connection with my heart, and in my head I call it my heart and head connection. What are my feelings and emotions about a father who works so hard? What is my what are my thoughts and opinions about this guy being my dad and him impacting the world? So let's see how the conclusion. Knowing that he is at hard work every day just makes me want to work even harder. I'm not going to give any credit for at work harder, being at work every day, because she already said that, but it makes me want to work even harder. I like that. So we're going to let that one count. In and out of school. That's a fragment. So I'm going to leave it there. And that is just one. Uh, Too many students end their essays, and that is just one, or those are my reasons. So I'm not going to move it forward. That is just one of the spectacular reasons. Spectacular reason. I love the spectacular part, giving an opinion there, that my dad is my hero. Restating the prompt. You don't have to restate the prompt at the end. If you already said that your dad is your hero in the conclusion, you could say, I look up to him so much, or I admire him, I hold him in high esteem. You can teach your kids to look up synonyms of the word hero and use that there in the conclusion instead. So I'm going to stay with two, because I could go on and on. I'll give credit. I could go on and on about that. I didn't do that. So I gave this paper a 2-3, and you heard the repetition. You heard a couple of grammatical errors, and I want to make a little note here on the bottom. I wrote each day when you're talking about every day, and every day together, compound word, when you're talking about things that are ordinary or normal. Make sure your kids know the difference between that. The last thing that I want to show you is my quick check rubric for teachers who feel overwhelmed and pressed for time. Basically, it has how to get from a 0 all the way to a 4 based on the grader 1 and grader 2. And since I was pretending to be both graders, I went ahead and placed check marks in the areas that I thought were appropriate. Okay. The introduction uh, was a little bit off because of the part about him being grumpy. The conclusion was a little bit off uh, because of the repetitiousness in there, but there were some good details in there. And so I would call that a 2-3 introduction and conclusion. It was expository focus, so I'll give a 3 in that area. There was some repetitions, some flow problems, so that would be here. You'd place a 2 there, some repetition and flow problems. It wasn't all throughout. If you see constant repetition and flow, then you would move it over here, because if you just write the same thing over and over, then that would be a big problem. Okay, so then you got to decide, is it weak or irrelevant development? And I was kind of back and forth between these two. I felt like the way that the student connected the ideas of the dad being a hard worker to the way that she reacts when he comes to pick her up at daycare, I thought that connected well enough to be a 3. I'm going to ask some questions in a moment. It was somewhat thoughtful, so I gave it a 3 there. But as you could tell, the student only had partial control over grammar, so I gave a 2 there. So then you just have to decide, is it a 2 or a 3? Well, it can be a 2 and a 3, because you can be 2 separate graders, or you can be both graders. And so this paper would probably get either a 4, a 2, and a 2, or if somebody's generous because of the development, they could get a 3. Now, if you notice the little dotted lines, uh, they're there so that this is on page 505 and 506 of the binder. You can score 5 essays on one page, save a lot of trees. And it's the reason I call it a quick check rubric is because you don't have to spend more time reading the rubric than you do reading the essay. Basically, I analyzed the bullets of how to get each score point, including a 0, which most scoring guides don't have. And it gives you kind of a checklist to go by. And if you want to, the reason the dotted lines are there is when you're finished with all five essays being scored on this sheet, you can flip it over and you can give each student feedback and then cut on the dotted line. And so what I did, pretending to be two different graders, the first grader focused on development and organization. The second grader focused on conventions. And so here are a few suggestions. Leave out the grumpy dad part on line 2. He works his butt off. Nice idiom on line 15 and 16. On the development part that I think could help, what exactly is your dad's role in the road making process? She didn't really explain exactly what he does. He just makes the roads. If she goes into more detail about that part and then talk about how dangerous it is, I thought that could make him sound like a hero. All of the passing cars, sometimes having to work at night when people can't see you as well. Why is why is making roads for all those important people, including the citizens, important? If you could add 2 or 3 sentences to that part, that would make it a little bit stronger. 3, and maybe convince that other person. The conventions, as we noticed, if you check, I noticed that they had a dependent clause followed by an independent clause on line 10. That needs to be there. There's fragments that I found on lines 10, 11, and 23. And when you're joining two independent clauses with a conjunction, like they did on line 17, you would want a comma there. Leave out the part about this is just one. It's an overused phrase by too many students. I call that the socks before the shoes. Those are my reasons. That is the reason why my dad is my hero. You already said that. And the student put day and care as 2 separate words when daycare is a compound word. And so that's how I would use pages 505 and 506 of the binder. And you can use the deck of cards. You can buy decks of cards, 2 decks for $1 at Dollar Tree, and call this activity whatever you want. I call it King of the Mode, where you just see which student can spend the most details on one reason that has one example that's explained and exploded. Now I want you to think of these 3 words: example, explain, explode. We talked about exploding being using higher vocabulary and voice. If you put those 3 words in alphabetical order, you get the same order. Take an example of your reason. We said that my dad is a hard worker. That's the reason. The example is that he makes roads. That's his hard work. And then you explain how making roads is hard using the 6 W's plus 1, who, what, when, where, why, which, and how. And I asked a couple of questions about that. And exploding is the vocabulary. If the student understands road making terminology like asphalt, pavement, the different equipment that is used to build the roads, the different kinds of trucks and tractors and signs they have to warn traffic that a road is being constructed. All of those things would help. And then, of course, your feelings, emotions, thoughts, opinions, figurative language, all of that will help in terms of the exploding part. That's the engaging the reader part. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like on the YouTube page if you get a chance. Follow me if you're not already doing so. Email me at writing_doctor@yahoo.com. Let me go ahead and close by showing you my folder, which has that information, so that you won't have to just memorize it. There it is, writing, and then it's _doctor@yahoo.com. If you have any questions, I've gotten several calls and emails this week about training, so I'm having to respond to those people. If you want to be part of the writing club and you're not already, you found this on YouTube, go to Facebook and type "May the Fours be with you," and you can join my writing club. If you type my name, Bill MacDonald, you'll be able to find me and we can be friends if you want.